It was late in the evening, the kind of Friday that carried both relief and exhaustion. The city streets were busy with people trying to rush home after a long week. Streetlights had just flickered on, painting soft yellow patches along the road. Cars hummed by, music floated from rolled-down windows, and somewhere far off a siren wailed and faded away. Alicia Monroe sat behind the wheel of her gray sedan, her mind half on the road and half on the files stacked on the seat beside her. She had just left the courthouse after another long day of hearings and meetings. As a state lawyer, her job often kept her late, but she didn't mind much. She had worked hard to earn her position, and she carried her success with quiet pride. The air conditioner hummed softly as she drove through the familiar stretch of Maple Avenue. The sky was turning a soft purple now, the last traces of sunlight slipping away. Alicia loosened her blazer a little, turned on the radio, and allowed herself a small smile. It had been a long week, but she had handled it well. The case she'd been preparing for was almost wrapped up, and all she wanted now was a quiet dinner and a good night's sleep. As she waited at a red light, she took a sip from her water bottle and checked her phone mounted on the dashboard. A message from her assistant popped up. "Good job today, boss. Rest up." Alicia smiled and typed a quick reply before the light turned green. She didn't notice the police car that had pulled up 2 lanes behind her. It wasn't until a few minutes later, as she turned onto a quieter street, that she noticed flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Red and blue bursts reflected off the back window, and the sound of the siren broke the calm rhythm of the evening. Alicia frowned slightly, glancing at the dashboard. She wasn't speeding. Her seatbelt was on. The car registration was up to date. There was no reason to be stopped. Still, she did what she knew was best. She slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. Her heart beat a little faster. Even though she had done nothing wrong, she knew what it was like to be in this position. Being stopped by the police as a black woman was never simple. There was always a mix of anxiety and alertness, even when you followed every rule. She put the car in park, turned off the radio, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. In her mirror, she saw the officer step out of his car. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and walked with slow, deliberate steps. The patrol lights kept flashing behind him, giving the moment an uneasy glow. He approached the car window and tapped it lightly with his flashlight. Alicia rolled it down halfway, keeping her expression calm. "Evening, officer," she said politely. "Is there a problem?" The man squinted at her, shining his light briefly inside the car. "License and registration," he said flatly. His tone wasn't friendly. It wasn't even neutral. It had a sharpness to it, like he had already made up his mind about her. "Of course," Alicia replied, reaching slowly toward her purse. "May I ask what this is about?" "Your vehicle matches the description of one involved in a disturbance nearby," he said. Alicia blinked. "A disturbance?" she repeated. "I just came from the courthouse. I'm on my way home." "License and registration," he repeated, his voice firmer now. She nodded and moved carefully, aware of every small motion. She retrieved her wallet and handed over her license and the car registration from the glove compartment. The officer took them without a word and looked them over under the beam of his flashlight. As he did, she studied his expression. Hard eyes, clenched jaw, and a faint look of irritation, as if her calmness somehow annoyed him. He looked back up. "Whose car is this?" "It's mine," she said evenly. "You own this car?" "Yes, officer." He nodded slowly but didn't seem convinced. "You said you came from the courthouse?" "Yes, I work there. What do you do?" he asked. "I'm an attorney," she said. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "An attorney?" he repeated as if the word didn't fit. "Yes," she said again, her voice still steady. "I'm a state prosecutor." For a second there was silence. The officer looked at her, then at the car, then back at her license. He didn't say anything, but his posture stiffened. He stepped back toward his patrol car without another word. Alicia watched him go, trying to keep her breathing calm. She had been through moments like this before. Not exactly this one, but ones that left her feeling small and unfairly judged. Still, she reminded herself to stay patient. Losing her composure wouldn't help. Several minutes passed. Cars drove by, slowing down to look at the flashing lights. A couple of people on the sidewalk paused to see what was happening. Alicia kept her hands on the wheel and her eyes forward. The officer returned, still holding her documents. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Alicia turned to him, surprised. I'm sorry, officer. Did I do something wrong? Step out of the vehicle, he repeated, his tone sharper. She hesitated for just a second before unbuckling her seatbelt and stepping out slowly. The air was cooler now, carrying a faint smell of rain. She stood beside the car, her posture composed but uneasy. Is there a problem? She asked again. I said your car matches the description of one involved in a disturbance, he said. Until I verify otherwise, I need to ask you a few questions. That's fine, Alicia said. But could you please tell me what kind of disturbance? Ma'am, I'm asking the questions, he said curtly. She took a quiet breath. Understood. He started asking where she had been, where she was going, and whether she had been near a gas station a few blocks away. His tone carried suspicion more than curiosity. Alicia answered each question calmly, though inside she felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. After a few more exchanges, he asked, Do you have any weapons or illegal items in the car? No, officer, she said. Just my briefcase, files, and a laptop. He nodded but didn't seem satisfied. Mind if I take a look? She hesitated. Do you have probable cause to search my car? His eyes narrowed. Is that a no? I'm just asking for clarification, she said gently. I know my rights, officer. Of course you do, he muttered, his voice laced with sarcasm. An attorney, right? Alicia kept her expression neutral. Even as the tension in the air thickened, she could feel the eyes of a few bystanders across the street, watching quietly. Someone had their phone out recording. The officer stepped closer. Ma'am, your attitude isn't helping. I'm just cooperating respectfully, she said. He stared at her for a long moment before stepping back again. Stay right here, he said, and walked to his car once more. She stood beside her vehicle, the flashing lights painting her skin red, then blue, then red again. She could hear her own heartbeat, slow and heavy. In that moment, she thought about how many people had found themselves in similar positions, calm, polite, and still treated with suspicion. After what felt like an eternity, the officer returned, still holding her license. Everything checks out, he said flatly. You can go. Alicia nodded once, relief mixing with quiet anger. Thank you, she said, taking back her license and registration. He didn't respond. He just turned and walked back to his car. Alicia sat back in the driver's seat, closed the door, and took a deep breath before starting the engine. Her hands trembled slightly, but she gripped the wheel firmly. She drove off slowly, the lights fading behind her. For several blocks, she said nothing, didn't turn the radio back on, didn't even glance at her phone. She just drove. The city felt different now, quieter, heavier. When she finally turned into her apartment complex, she parked and sat for a moment, letting the silence fill the car. She thought about what had just happened. She hadn't been rude, hadn't broken any laws, hadn't given any reason for suspicion, and yet she had still been treated like she didn't belong behind the wheel of her own car. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of the experience pressing down, not new but still painful every time. After a minute, she reached for her phone. There were already a few notifications from social media, short clips from the encounter, posted by one of the bystanders. She hadn't realized anyone was recording that long. Her heart sank slightly. She clicked one of the videos and watched herself on the screen, calm but visibly tense, standing by her car as the officer questioned her. The video didn't show everything, but it showed enough for anyone to see how she was being treated. She sighed quietly and locked her phone. She wasn't sure yet what to do about it. She didn't want attention, didn't want drama, but she also knew that staying silent didn't help anyone. That night, she couldn't sleep easily. She replayed the encounter in her mind, the flashlight in her face, the tone of his voice, the disbelief when she said she was an attorney. It wasn't just the stop that bothered her. It was the assumption behind it, the quiet disbelief that someone who looked like her could hold such a position. She knew she'd have to decide whether to report it, but she wanted to take a day to think. She wanted to act, not react. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through her window, she got up early, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop. She pulled up the local police department's contact page and began typing a statement. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before she started. She wrote carefully just the facts. No emotion, no exaggeration, just truth. She knew that truth alone would be enough. When she finished, she saved the document and sat back. A small smile crossed her face, not because she was happy, but because she knew she would handle this her way, calmly, professionally, and with purpose. She picked up her phone and called her colleague at the courthouse, explaining what happened. He was shocked, then furious, but Alicia reassured him she was fine. "I'm not looking for revenge," she said quietly. "Just accountability." Later that afternoon, when she arrived at work, a few colleagues approached her, having seen the video online. Some offered sympathy, others outrage. Alicia thanked them all but stayed focused. She had work to do, and she refused to let the experience define her day. Still, in the back of her mind, she knew this wasn't over. The story had only begun, and what happened next would not only reveal who she was, but would expose something much larger. The quiet prejudice that lingered behind authority, and how truth could confront it head-on. She took a deep breath, straightened her blazer, and walked into her office. Whatever came next, she was ready. The weekend passed slowly for Alicia. Though she tried to fill her time with errands and quiet moments at home, her mind kept circling back to the traffic stop. It played over in her head like a movie she couldn't pause. The flashing lights, the officer's cold stare, the feeling of standing on the side of the road like she didn't belong there. She had faced prejudice before, but this time it cut deeper. Maybe because she had done everything right. Maybe because it happened not to someone on the news, but to her, a lawyer who spent her days fighting for fairness. By Monday morning, the video had spread further. Someone had tagged her name after realizing who she was. Her inbox was flooded with messages, friends checking in, co-workers expressing outrage, strangers offering support. Even local journalists were reaching out asking for interviews. Alicia wasn't ready to speak publicly. Not yet. She wanted to handle things the right way, through official channels, not social media outrage. She believed in systems even when they failed. That was her training, her belief. Justice wasn't about noise, it was about process. When she arrived at her office that morning, the usual buzz of conversation seemed to quiet as she walked in. A few people offered sympathetic smiles. Others just nodded respectfully. Her assistant, Clara, followed her into her office, closing the door gently behind her. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Alicia managed a small smile. "I'm fine," she said. "Just tired." "I saw the video," Clara said, her eyes full of concern. "Everyone's talking about it. I can't believe that happened to you." Alicia sighed. "I wish I could say I was surprised," she said. "But I'm not." Clara hesitated before speaking again. "Are you going to press charges or file a complaint?" "I already filed a report with the department," Alicia said, leaning back in her chair. "But I'm not sure what will happen. These things don't always get handled quickly." Clara nodded, but her expression showed frustration. "You deserve better than that," she said quietly. "I know," Alicia replied. "But I also know how this works. I just need to give it time." The rest of the morning was slow. Alicia tried to focus on her casework, but every time her phone buzzed, her attention slipped. By noon, she decided to step out for coffee just to clear her head. The cafe across the street was busy, filled with the sound of clinking cups and murmured conversations. As she stood in line, a man behind her tapped her shoulder. "Excuse me," he said. "You're the woman from that video, aren't you?" Alicia turned, slightly startled. "Yes, that's me," she said carefully. The man shook his head. "What that officer did was wrong," he said. "I saw the whole thing. You handled yourself with so much grace. Respect to you." "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I appreciate that." She wasn't used to strangers recognizing her, but she could sense the mixture of sympathy and admiration in his tone. It comforted her, even if just a little. When she returned to her office, her supervisor, Mr. Hensley, was waiting near her door. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and kind eyes, someone Alicia respected deeply. "Can we talk?" he asked gently. "Of course," Alicia said, stepping inside. He closed the door and motioned for her to sit. "I saw the video," he began. "I also spoke with the chief of police this morning." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "You did?" "Yes," he said. "He's aware of who you are and how serious this is. The department has opened an internal investigation." Alicia folded her hands on the desk. "I appreciate that," she said. "But I don't want special treatment because of my job." "I just want fairness," Hensley nodded. "I understand. But sometimes being who you are gives you the voice others don't have. You might not want attention. But this case could shine a light on something bigger. Alicia looked down for a moment, then back at him. "I know," she said quietly. "I just don't want to become a symbol. I want change, not fame. And that's exactly why people will listen to you," he said, standing. "If you decide to speak publicly, I'll support you." Alicia nodded, appreciating his trust. Later that afternoon, as she sat reviewing her files, her phone buzzed with a new message, a number she didn't recognize. The text read, "This is Captain Ross from Internal Affairs. We'd like to meet to discuss your report." She replied politely, agreeing to a meeting the next day. That night, Alicia barely slept. She kept thinking about what to say, what to ask, how to make sure her experience didn't just get brushed aside. She wanted to be measured and calm, but also firm enough to be heard. The next morning, she arrived at the police headquarters right on time. The building stood tall and clean, but the air inside felt heavy. She was escorted to a conference room where two officers waited, Captain Ross and a woman named Detective Lane. Both greeted her professionally. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Monroe," the captain said. "We've reviewed the video and your written statement. We'd like to go over a few points." "Of course," Alicia said, sitting across from them. They asked her to recount the event, where she was driving, what the officer said, how he treated her. Alicia spoke clearly, describing each detail without exaggeration. She made sure her tone stayed steady. When she finished, Captain Ross sighed. "I'll be honest," he said. "The footage doesn't look good. We've identified the officer as Daniel Briggs. He's been with the department for 9 years. Alicia recognized the name. "Has he had complaints before?" she asked. The captain hesitated. "There have been a few, yes. Mostly about attitude and conduct during traffic stops. Nothing that led to disciplinary action." "That sounds like a pattern," she said softly. Detective Lane nodded slightly. "It does," she said. The captain continued, "We're taking this seriously. He's been placed on temporary leave while we investigate." Alicia nodded, though a small part of her wondered if that meant anything real would change. After the meeting, she stepped outside into the sunlight, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because she'd finally spoken up. Heavier because she knew how long these processes could drag on. She took a walk before returning to her car. The city around her moved like nothing had happened. People rushing to work, buses hissing at the stops, children laughing near the park. For everyone else, it was just another day. For her, it was something different. By midweek, the local news had picked up the story. Reporters began standing outside the courthouse asking for comments. Alicia avoided them politely, saying only that she trusted the process. But the attention grew, and soon community leaders began reaching out. One evening, she received a call from a local advocacy group. "We'd love for you to speak at our town meeting," the woman on the phone said. "Your story could help raise awareness." Alicia hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready to speak publicly," she said. "I understand," the woman replied kindly. "But people need to see what justice looks like when it's handled with dignity. You're the right person for that." That night, Alicia sat on her couch, her laptop open in front of her, but her mind far away. She thought about the countless times she'd seen similar stories, but they didn't always end with fairness. People were mistreated, dismissed, or ignored. But she wasn't just anyone. She had a platform. Maybe she could use it to help. After some thought, she wrote a short post on her social media page. It wasn't angry or dramatic, just honest. She wrote, "Last week I was stopped and detained without cause. I was calm, respectful, and compliant. Yet I was treated with suspicion because of how I look. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because this experience reminded me how much work we still have to do. I believe in justice, why not revenge? I believe in accountability, not hostility. Let's do better together." Within hours, the post spread widely. People shared it, commented with encouragement, and thanked her for her grace. Even a few officers commented, acknowledging the importance of fair policing. The next day, when she arrived at work, her assistant greeted her with a smile. "Your post is everywhere," Clara said. "People are really listening." Alicia smiled faintly. "I just told the truth," she said. "That's all I can do." But as the days went by, she began to realize her story wasn't going away. The department confirmed the investigation was ongoing, but no details were public yet. Community meetings were being organized, and Alicia's name kept coming up as someone people looked to for guidance. One Friday afternoon, she received a message from the district attorney's office asking her to attend a meeting about public relations concerns. She knew exactly what that meant. They wanted her to be careful about how she represented herself and the office. When she entered the meeting room, the district attorney, a tall man with calm authority, greeted her warmly but directly. "Alicia, you've been handling this situation with professionalism," he said, "but you're now part of a much larger public conversation. I need you to know that the department supports you, but we also need to be cautious about how this develops." "I understand," Alicia said. "I've tried to stay neutral and respectful." "And you've done an excellent job," he replied. "Just keep doing what you're doing. You're showing people what true integrity looks like." That night, Alicia drove home feeling proud but tired. The weight of everything, her job, the investigation, the public attention, was starting to wear on her. She missed the quiet simplicity of her old routine. When she pulled into her driveway, she noticed a small note left under her door. It was from a neighbor she didn't know well. It read, "I saw your video and your post. Thank you for standing up with such grace. My daughter looks up to you now." Alicia held the note for a long time. It made her smile, but it also made her tear up. She hadn't set out to inspire anyone. She just wanted to be treated fairly. But maybe that was how change started. Not with big speeches, but with small, honest acts of courage. Over the weekend, she finally decided to accept the invitation to the town meeting. She didn't write a fancy speech. She just wrote down a few points she wanted to share, about fairness, about understanding, about the importance of listening. When the day came, the community hall was packed. People filled the seats, standing along the walls, waiting for her to speak. She stood at the podium, her palms slightly sweaty, her heart racing. "Good evening," she began softly. "My name is Alicia Monroe. Some of you may have seen a video of me being stopped by a police officer. That experience was uncomfortable and, yes, unfair. But I'm not here to talk about anger. I'm here to talk about hope." She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "That night I was treated with suspicion because of my skin color. But I stayed calm because I knew who I was. And I'm here tonight because I believe we can build a world where no one has to defend their dignity just to get home safely." The audience was silent, listening closely. "I don't hate that officer," she continued. "I want him to understand why what he did was wrong. I want him and others used to learn, not just be punished. Because real change isn't about revenge, it's about growth." When she finished, the crowd rose to their feet, applauding warmly. Alicia smiled, humbled by the response. As she stepped down from the stage, a few people came up to shake her hand. Young students, older residents, even a couple of off-duty officers. One of them said quietly, "You made me think differently tonight." And in that moment, Alicia realized something important. The story was no longer just about what had happened to her. It was about what could happen because of her. She walked out into the cool night air, feeling lighter than she had in days. The investigation was still ongoing, and there would be challenges ahead, but she had taken the first step toward something bigger than herself. A movement of understanding, accountability, and quiet strength. The days after the town meeting felt different for Alicia. Something inside her had shifted. She had gone there simply to speak her truth. But when she stood in front of that crowd and saw the look in people's eyes, the mix of hope, pain, and belief, she realized her voice carried weight. She hadn't planned to become a public figure or an advocate, but life had a strange way of pushing people into roles they didn't expect. All she had done was tell her story honestly. Yet somehow that honesty had become a spark that others wanted to follow. By the following week, more news outlets were covering her story. Some called her the calm lawyer who handled injustice with grace. Others called her the woman who turned a traffic stop into a lesson in dignity. Alicia tried not to let the attention get to her. She kept going to work every morning, preparing her cases, attending hearings, and helping people, just like always, but beneath the surface. The investigation into Officer Briggs was moving forward. One afternoon, while she was in her office reviewing a set of case notes, her phone buzzed with a call from Captain Ross. She answered immediately. "Good afternoon, Captain," she said. "Ms. Monroe," he greeted. "I wanted to update you on the investigation. Would you be available to come by this evening? There are some findings we'd like to discuss in person." Her heart gave a small, anxious thump. "Of course," she said. I'll be there. When she arrived at the police headquarters later that day, she was escorted into the same conference room as before. The atmosphere felt heavier this time. The captain was already there, and beside him sat Detective Lane again, along with a third person, a quiet man in a suit who looked like he worked in legal affairs. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Monroe," the captain began. "We've completed our review of the incident involving Officer Briggs." Alicia nodded, keeping her composure. "All right," he continued. "We examined the body camera footage, witness statements, and the bystander videos. The evidence confirms that the stop was not based on any valid suspicion. The officer's behavior during the encounter also did not meet professional standards." Alicia sat still, listening. "In addition," he said, "we found inconsistencies in the report he filed afterward. It appears certain details were added that didn't align with the footage." She exhaled slowly. "So what does that mean?" "It means," the captain said, "disciplinary action will be taken. The officer has been placed on unpaid suspension pending final review. The department will also issue a formal apology to you." Alicia looked at him steadily. "An apology is appreciated," she said. "But I'm more concerned about what happens next. How will this stop from happening again?" The room was quiet for a moment. Detective Lane spoke next. "That's something we're working on," she said. "Your case has brought attention to the need for more comprehensive bias training. The chief is considering a policy review." Alicia nodded. "That's a start," she said softly. "But real change needs consistency, not just reaction." The captain gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "I agree with you," he said, "and I hope you'll continue to be part of that conversation." When Alicia left the building, the evening air felt heavy but freeing. She had answers, not all, but enough for now. The truth was out, and that mattered. Still, she knew this wasn't the end. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed again. It was her friend and colleague, Maya. "Hey," Maya said over the line. "I just saw the update about the investigation. They're finally taking it seriously." "Yes," Alicia replied. "They confirmed the stop was unjustified." "That's good news," Maya said. "But you know, this is bigger than just one officer." Alicia smiled faintly. "I know, and that's exactly what worries me. One case can be solved, but the system behind it, that takes time." That night she sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea and staring at the open laptop in front of her. News articles filled the screen, most of them about her case. She scrolled slowly, her eyes catching on one headline that read, "Attorney challenges racial bias with quiet strength." She clicked it open and read the article. It described her as a symbol of calm resistance. The words felt strange, like they belonged to someone else. She hadn't planned any of this. She had just lived through something unfair and decided to speak truthfully about it. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from her mother. "Hi, Mom," Alicia said softly. "Hi, sweetheart," her mother replied warmly. "I've been watching the news. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you." "Thank you," Alicia said, smiling. "That means a lot." "You always believed in justice," her mother continued. "Even as a little girl, you couldn't stand unfairness. I remember you defending your classmates in school when someone picked on them." Alicia laughed gently. "I guess some things never change." Her mother's tone softened. "Just take care of yourself, okay? You don't have to carry everyone's weight. You've done enough." "I know," Alicia said, "but I can't stop here. I think I can help make something good out of this." After they hung up, Alicia sat quietly for a while. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to carry everyone's weight." She knew that was true, but she also knew she had an opportunity now. A chance to do something meaningful with what happened. Over the next week, the police department officially released its statement, confirming that the stop had been unjustified. They also announced new steps, including mandatory bias training for all patrol officers and an independent review board to monitor complaints. The announcement made headlines again, and Alicia's name was mentioned in nearly every story. At work, her colleagues congratulated her. "You did it," Clara said cheerfully one morning. "They're changing policy because of you." Alicia smiled. "Not just because of me," she said. "Because people cared enough to speak up." Still, she couldn't help feeling a quiet satisfaction. Progress was slow, but it was happening. A few days later, she received an email from Captain Ross. The subject line read, "Meeting request. Resolution follow-up." When she arrived at the station that afternoon, the captain greeted her with a more relaxed smile than before. "I wanted to tell you personally," he said, "that Officer Briggs has been officially dismissed from the department." Alicia felt a moment of stillness. "Dismissed?" she asked. "Yes," he said. The review board found that his report falsifications and prior complaints showed a consistent pattern of bias and misconduct. "We couldn't allow him to continue serving." She nodded slowly. "I see," he continued. "It's not the outcome we take lightly, but accountability is part of integrity. I thought you deserved to know before it became public." Alicia looked at him with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that." As she drove home later, the sun was setting, turning the sky golden and pink. She should have felt relief, and she did partly. But more than that, she felt reflection. Losing a job didn't erase the larger issue. It didn't undo the fear she'd felt that night on the side of the road. It didn't heal the mistrust that still lived between communities and those meant to protect them. But it was a beginning. That night, she sat down and began writing again, not a report this time, but a plan. She wanted to propose a long-term project, a partnership between the state's legal office and the police department to host open forums and educational workshops about equality, empathy, and community understanding. She titled the document Bridging Trust. When she presented the idea to her supervisor the next day, he listened carefully. "This could be big," he said. "If we can get funding, it could make real difference." "That's the goal," Alicia said. "If we can help even a few officers see people differently, not as suspects but as individuals, then it's worth it." He smiled. "You've turned something painful into something powerful." "That's rare, Alicia." As the weeks passed, Alicia's project began taking shape. Meetings were scheduled, local organizations offered support, and even a few officers volunteered to participate. She worked tirelessly, balancing her regular duties with planning sessions and community outreach. One afternoon, as she walked out of a meeting at City Hall, a young woman approached her nervously. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Ms. Monroe?" "Yes," Alicia said kindly. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said. "I watched what happened to you. I've been scared of speaking up about my own experience with bias, but after seeing how you handled everything, I finally filed my complaint. I just wanted you to know that." Alicia's heart warmed. "I'm proud of you," she said. "It takes courage to do that." The woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing it's possible to stand up and still be graceful." After she left, Alicia stood for a moment on the courthouse steps, watching people pass by. It struck her how easily one story could ripple outward, how one act of quiet strength could encourage others to find their voices. By the end of the month, the first public forum under her Bridging Trust program was held. Officers, lawyers, community leaders, and citizens gathered in the same hall where she had given her first speech weeks earlier. The room was full again, but this time the energy was different, hopeful, collaborative. Alicia stood at the front, looking around at faces of every color, every background, all sitting together. She began her talk simply. "I never imagined a traffic stop would lead me here," she said. "But maybe that's how change happens, not from comfort but from challenge. We all make mistakes, but what matters most is how we choose to grow from them." The audience listened quietly, nodding. "I'm not here as a victim," she continued. "I'm here as a believer, someone who still believes that fairness can win, that understanding can replace fear. That's why we're here, to build that trust one conversation at a time." When she finished, people applauded warmly. Officers and citizens shook hands afterward. A few even stayed late, talking about ideas for the next forum. That night, as Alicia drove home, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The same roads that once made her nervous now felt calm again. The same city lights that once looked harsh now seemed gentle. She knew there would still be struggles ahead. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight, but she also knew that courage had a ripple effect. In a quiet moment at a stoplight, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The reflection of red and blue lights still made her heart skip for a second, an old instinct that might never completely fade. But this time she took a deep breath and smiled, because now those lights didn't just remind her of fear. They reminded her of change, of how one moment of injustice had turned into a movement of awareness and unity. And as she drove forward into the night, Alicia felt certain of one thing. Sometimes, standing tall in the face of unfairness doesn't just free one person. It can awaken the conscience of a whole community. The months after Alicia's first public forum passed quickly. What had started as one woman's personal story was slowly turning into a movement that reached far beyond her small city. People from nearby towns began calling, asking if she could bring the Bridging Trust project to their communities too. Teachers, social workers, and local pastors sent letters, thanking her for creating space where real conversations could finally happen. It wasn't easy work. Every week brought a new challenge. Some people supported her efforts openly, while others remained skeptical. There were a few who said she was just trying to make the police look bad, and others who thought she was being too forgiving. Alicia tried not to let either extreme distract her. She reminded herself why she'd started this in the first place, to help people understand one another. Her days became long and full. In the mornings, she'd still handle her usual legal duties. In the afternoons and evenings, she'd visit schools or community centers to talk about fairness, respect, and courage. Sometimes she'd meet small groups of officers in training sessions and listen to them talk about their own fears and frustrations. One afternoon, she sat in a classroom at the police academy, listening to a group of young recruits share their thoughts after watching a video about bias awareness. "It's tough," one of them admitted. "We're trained to be alert to see danger, but sometimes it's hard to separate real danger from assumptions." Another nodded. "Yeah, like you don't even realize when bias creeps in. It's not about hate, it's about habit." Alicia listened carefully, then spoke gently. "That's exactly why we're here. We can't change what we don't recognize. The goal isn't to shame anyone. It's to make sure we see each other clearly without old shadows in the way." By the end of the session, several recruits came up to thank her. One of them said quietly, "Ma'am, before this program I didn't really think about how people feel on the other side of a traffic stop. But I do now." That simple comment stayed with her. It reminded her that change didn't always happen through grand speeches or viral videos. Sometimes it happened quietly, in small rooms where people dared to be honest. Meanwhile, the media attention around Alicia's work grew again. A local TV station invited her for an interview about the progress of her initiative. She hesitated at first. She didn't like the spotlight, but her supervisor encouraged her. "People need to see what constructive change looks like," he said. "Not just protests or outrage, but real solutions." So she agreed. On the day of the interview, she wore a simple navy dress and a calm smile. The reporter asked her about her journey, from being unfairly detained to leading a project that was now influencing training programs across the state. "What do you think helped you stay calm that night?" the reporter asked. Alicia thought for a moment. "I think it was knowing who I am," she said. "When you know your truth, you don't have to prove it to anyone. You just have to stand in it." The interview aired later that evening, and it spread quickly online. Comments poured in from people who said her words gave them strength or made them rethink how they treated others. Some even shared stories of their own experiences, moments when they had felt unseen, judged, or powerless. A few days later, Alicia received a handwritten letter at her office. The envelope had no return address. Inside, the note read, "I was raised to fear people who looked different from me. But after watching your interview, I realized how wrong that fear was. I just wanted to say thank you for helping me open my eyes." Alicia read the note twice, tears forming quietly in her eyes. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about moments like this, when a single heart changed its rhythm toward compassion. But not everyone was happy. As her work gained attention, some voices online began to criticize her. They said she was exaggerating the issue or making the police look weak. A few even sent hurtful messages. At first, she tried to ignore them, but some nights it weighed on her more than she wanted to admit. One evening, she sat on her couch with her laptop open, scrolling through the comments on a recent article. Most were supportive, but a few harsh ones stood out. She sighed quietly. "Why do people hate what they don't understand?" she murmured. Her phone buzzed just then. It was a message from Captain Ross. "Don't let the noise drown out the good," it read. "Real change always shakes things up." Alicia smiled softly. She appreciated his steady support. Despite his tough exterior, the captain had been one of the first to admit that the system needed fixing. Over time, they had developed a kind of mutual respect. In the following weeks, the state government announced that Alicia's Bridging Trust initiative would be expanded statewide. The governor's office invited her to speak at a regional conference on community police relations. It was the biggest stage she had ever faced. The day of the conference, the hall was filled with people, officers, lawyers, educators, and journalists. Alicia stood backstage, holding her notes, feeling a familiar nervous flutter. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When her name was announced, she walked up to the podium to a round of applause. The lights were bright, but she could see faces in the crowd, curious, expectant, hopeful. She began simply, as she always did. "A few months ago, I was just another woman driving home after work," she said. "That drive changed everything for me. But what I've learned since then is that one moment of unfairness can become a doorway to understanding, if we let it." She spoke about empathy, about how justice wasn't only about laws, but about hearts. She shared stories from her forums, the recruits who had opened up, the young woman who found courage, the quiet letters from strangers. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a few seconds before the applause began again. It grew louder and longer until even Alicia had to blink back emotion. Afterward, several attendees came up to speak with her. One was an older police chief from another city. "I've been in this job for 30 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of division. But what you're doing, this gives me hope again." Another was a young law student who said, "You've made me want to go into public service, to fight for fairness, not just talk about it." That night, as Alicia returned to her hotel room, she stood by the window looking out over the city lights. She thought about how much had changed in such a short time. From a frightened night on the roadside to this, a hall full of people ready to listen. It almost didn't feel real. But she also knew this was not the end. Success was never permanent. It needed care, honesty, and continued effort. A few weeks later, she got an unexpected invitation from the State Police Academy. They wanted her to help design a permanent part of their training program. It would be based on her Bridging Trust model and include real-life stories, interactive discussions, and mentorship. When she read the letter, Alicia felt a wave of quiet pride. She accepted immediately. The first time she stood in front of the new batch of recruits, she looked around the room and said, "This isn't just about policies. It's about people. Every stop, every decision, every word you speak, it's a chance to either build trust or break it. Choose wisely." She could tell from their faces that her words reached them. Some took notes. Others simply nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Outside the academy, her work continued. Community leaders formed committees to keep the dialogue alive. Schools invited her to speak about fairness and respect. Churches and youth centers started hosting open discussions between police and residents. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements. But there was also progress. People were talking, listening, trying. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Alicia took a walk through a quiet park near her home. The air was cool and the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and lavender. She sat on a bench, watching families stroll by, children laughing, joggers passing. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to just breathe. Her phone buzzed softly with a message from Maya. "Look how far you've come. I hope you're proud." Alicia smiled, typing back, "I am. But there's still so much more to do." As night settled in, she reflected on everything. The fear, the anger, the exhaustion, and also the courage, the connection, the light that had come from it all. She thought of her younger self, the one standing on the roadside, hands trembling slightly as she faced a man who saw only what he wanted to see. She wished she could tell that version of herself, "You're not powerless. You're a seed. And someday even this moment will grow into something beautiful." Before leaving the park, she stopped by the community board near the entrance. There, pinned among flyers for bake sales and volunteer drives, was a printed quote someone had posted. It read, "Change doesn't begin with everyone. It begins with someone who refuses to stay silent." Alicia smiled. Whoever had put that there understood exactly what she had learned. Back home, she sat by her desk, flipping through the old notes she had made in the early days of bridging trust. The handwriting was messy, the ideas half-formed, but they carried the heartbeat of everything she had built since then. She added a new line at the bottom of the last page. Never underestimate the power of calm courage. The next morning, she received a call from Captain Ross. "I just wanted to let you know," he said. "The first statewide report on the program came in. Complaints about biased stops have dropped by almost 40% in participating departments." Alicia's eyes widened. "That's incredible." He chuckled softly. "I told you this was worth it." "It's not just me," she said. "It's all of us choosing to do better." As they ended the call, Alicia leaned back in her chair, smiling. Change was slow, yes, but it was real. And that was enough to keep her going. Later that day, she spoke again at another forum. As she stood before the crowd, she looked out at the faces, officers, citizens, students, elders, and felt a quiet, steady strength rise in her chest. She said, "The night I was pulled over, I thought the world saw me as less than I am. But now I know that moment didn't define me. It defined how far I was willing to go to make sure no one else felt that way again. We all have that power. We all have that choice." The audience rose in applause, and Alicia smiled. Not the smile of someone who had won, but of someone who had healed. And as she stepped down from the stage, she knew one truth more clearly than ever. Sometimes the idea, most powerful change doesn't come from fighting louder. It comes from standing calmly, speaking truth, and refusing to give up on people. Months turned into a year, and the world around Alicia began to change in ways she never imagined. What had once been a small, local effort had now become something much larger, something that reached beyond city borders and even state lines. The Bridging Trust program had spread to several neighboring states. Police departments began adopting similar workshops, and universities started using her case study to teach about professional ethics and social justice. Alicia's days were now filled with travel, meetings, and speaking engagements. Some days she felt exhausted, but it was the kind of tiredness that came with purpose, the kind that reminded her she was building something worth the effort. Still, she tried to stay grounded. She kept her morning routine simple: a walk with coffee in hand, a quiet moment before the day began. She still lived in the same modest apartment, though people often told her she should move to a bigger place now. "Maybe later," she would say with a smile. For her, peace was more valuable than luxury. One afternoon, she received an email from a national civil rights organization. They wanted to honor her with an award for her contributions to justice and community reform. At first, she hesitated to accept. She had never done any of this for recognition. But after some thought, she agreed. Not for herself, but for what it represented. The award ceremony was held in a grand hall in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with people from all over the country: lawyers, community leaders, activists, and families. Alicia stood backstage, adjusting her bracelet nervously, when her name was announced. She walked up to the stage to a warm round of applause. The lights shone brightly, but she stayed calm. The host handed her the award, a simple glass plaque engraved with her name and the words, "For inspiring change through integrity and courage." As the crowd quieted, Alicia began to speak. "I never expected to stand here," she said softly. "A little over a year ago, I was pulled over on a quiet street, questioned for something I hadn't done, and treated as if I didn't belong. That moment could have broken me, but instead, it taught me something. It taught me that dignity isn't given by others, it's something we carry inside no matter what happens." The audience listened silently, some nodding, others wiping their eyes. "I also learned," she continued, "that justice isn't just about laws or courtrooms. It's about how we treat each other when no one's watching. It's about seeing the humanity in every face even when fear tries to tell us otherwise." When she finished, the applause was long and heartfelt. People stood as she stepped down from the podium, shaking her hand, thanking her, telling her how her courage had changed the way they saw the world. Later that night, back in her hotel room, Alicia placed the glass award on the desk and sat beside it quietly. She smiled, but not out of pride. It was more a gentle sense of peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've turned something painful into something meaningful. She picked up her phone and called her mother. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "I just saw the ceremony on TV," her mother said with excitement. "You look so beautiful up there. I'm so proud of you." Alicia laughed lightly. "Thank you. It still feels strange. All this attention." Her mother's voice grew tender. "You've earned it, sweetheart. You didn't just speak up for yourself. You spoke up for so many others who couldn't." After hanging up, Alicia sat for a long while, looking out at the city lights through her hotel window. For a moment, she thought about how far she'd come. From the roadside confrontation to this moment of recognition, life truly had a way of turning pain into purpose. A few weeks later, Alicia was invited to appear on a national morning show. She was nervous again, but she knew the importance of the message she carried. The host greeted her warmly and asked, "What made you choose compassion over anger?" Alicia thought for a second and said, "Because anger burns quickly, compassion lasts. It builds bridges instead of walls." The host nodded, clearly moved. "That's powerful," he said. After the interview, Alicia began receiving messages from people all over the country. Some were from citizens, others from officers, even students. They shared their own stories of misunderstanding, forgiveness, and courage. One letter stood out. It came from a small-town police officer who wrote, "Your story changed the way I wear my badge. Now I remind myself every morning that I serve people, not power." Alicia read it 3 times, her eyes misty. Those words meant more to her than any award ever could. Meanwhile, the Bridging Trust program continued to expand. She hired a small team to help manage it, passionate people who believed in empathy and fairness just as deeply as she did. Together, they organized new events, built partnerships, and worked to make the training sessions part of standard police education nationwide. But even with all her success, Alicia stayed humble. She never wanted to be seen as a hero, only as a reminder that anyone could create change with courage and calm. One afternoon, while speaking at a community college, a student asked her, "Do you ever wish that night never happened?" Alicia paused, thinking carefully. "A part of me does," she admitted. "It was frightening and unfair. But another part of me knows that without that night, none of this would exist. Sometimes life gives us pain not to destroy us, but to shape us into something stronger." The audience was quiet for a moment, then applauded softly. Over time, Alicia's name became well known in professional circles. She was invited to collaborate with policymakers, advise on reforms, and even contribute to a national report on fair policing practices. Still, she never forgot her roots, the small town, the quiet streets, and the people who had stood by her when the world seemed uncertain. One summer morning, she returned to her old neighborhood for a community celebration. It was held in the same park where she had once sat alone, reflecting after one of her early forums. Now the park was full of people, families, officers, children playing, music in the air. As she walked through the crowd, people greeted her warmly. "Thank you for everything you've done," one woman said, shaking her hand. "You made us believe things could really change." Alicia smiled. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "It was all of us choosing to listen to each other." On the edge of the park, she noticed a small group of officers helping set up tables and serve food. Among them was a young recruit who looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Hey, Ms. Monroe," he said. "I attended one of your sessions last month. It really made me think differently about the job." She smiled back. "That's all I could ever hope for," she said. Later, as the sun began to set, the community gathered near the park's small stage for closing remarks. The local mayor spoke briefly, then called Alicia forward. The crowd clapped as she stepped up, microphone in hand. "I don't have a speech tonight," she said with a soft smile. "I just want to say thank you. She gestured to the crowd. "This is what hope looks like. People coming together not because they have to, but because they want to understand each other." There was a gentle wave of applause, followed by silence as she added, "Change isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing. And what I see here tonight gives me hope that we're willing." Afterward, she stayed to talk with people, laughing and sharing stories until the stars appeared in the sky. The night was filled with warmth, the kind that made all the long days and sleepless nights worth it. A few days later, Alicia received a message from the governor's office. They wanted her to join a newly formed commission focused on national justice and equality initiatives. It would mean more travel, more responsibility, but also a chance to bring her vision to an even larger scale. That evening, she sat quietly with a cup of tea, thinking about the offer. Part of her was tired, ready for rest, but another part knew this was the next natural step, the chance to keep building what she had started. She called her friend Maya to talk it over. "Do you think I should do it?" Alicia asked. Maya laughed softly. "You already know the answer. You were meant for this. You just needed life to show you." Alicia smiled. "Maybe you're right." A week later, she accepted the role. Her first meeting with the commission took place in a large glass-walled building overlooking the Capitol. As she sat around the table with senators, lawyers, and policy experts, she couldn't help but think about that night long ago. The flashing lights, the fear, the uncertainty. And now here she was, helping shape laws that could protect others from living that same fear. When it was her turn to speak, she said, "We can write new policies, yes. But we must also write new stories. Stories where trust replaces fear and understanding replaces judgment." The room was quiet, listening. She could see it in their faces. They understood. After the meeting, as she walked out of the building, a cool breeze passed over her. She paused for a moment, looking at the sky. It was the same sky she'd seen 100 times before, but somehow, it felt different now. Lighter. Freer. She thought about all the people who had been part of her journey. The bystander who filmed that night. The captain who chose accountability over silence. The recruits who opened their minds. The communities that chose hope over anger. Each of them had played a part. Life had come full circle, but she knew the story wasn't really ending. It was just growing, reaching new hearts. That night, back in her apartment, Alicia placed her award on the shelf beside a framed photo of her family. She looked at it, smiled softly, then whispered to herself, "We did it." She turned off the light and stood by the window, watching the city glow below. In that quiet moment, she didn't feel like a hero or a headline. She just felt human. The same woman who had once faced fear and chosen calm, who had once been silent and learned to speak. And as the night deepened outside, Alicia knew one truth with complete certainty, that real change doesn't start in courtrooms or meetings or awards. It starts in moments when ordinary people decide to stand firm, stay kind, and refuse to see anyone as less than human. And that was the legacy she hoped would live on. Not her name, not her story, but the simple, powerful belief that fairness and understanding can rebuild even the most broken bridges. The following year felt like a turning point, not only for Alicia but for many people around her. The Bridging Trust initiative had grown into something much bigger than anyone expected. It wasn't just a program anymore. It had become a model used by cities across the country. People called it the Monroe Method, though Alicia always tried to correct them gently. "It's not mine," she would say. "It's ours. It belongs to everyone who believes in understanding instead of fear." Still, it amazed her to see how far it had come. She often remembered that first small meeting in the community hall. Just a few faces, nervous and uncertain. Now her talks filled auditoriums. Journalists called her a quiet force for change. But to Alicia, she was still just the same person who had once been pulled over for no reason and had decided that fear wouldn't write her story. Her days were busy, but she still made time for the small things that kept her grounded. Her morning coffee, walks through the park, weekend visits with her mother. She had learned that no matter how large the world grew around her, peace always started small. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents in her office, her assistant knocked on the door. "You have a visitor," he said with a smile. Alicia looked up. "Who is it?" "He says you might not remember him," her assistant replied. "But he used to work for the police department. His name is Thomas Briggs." Alicia froze for a moment. The name took her back instantly. The flashing lights, the cold tone, the uneasy air of that night. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in over a year. "Send him in," she said softly. When the door opened, a man stepped in, older-looking, his expression cautious. His once confident posture was gone. He looked different, not the same person she had faced that night on the road. "Ms. Monroe," he began quietly, "I hope you don't mind me coming here." Alicia studied him for a moment, then gestured to the chair. "Please sit down." He nodded, sitting slowly. "I know I'm probably the last person you expected to see," he said. "I'll admit it's surprising," she replied calmly. "What brings you here?" He took a breath, his eyes lowering. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." The room fell quiet. Alicia said nothing at first. He continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I've had a lot of time to think since that night. Losing my job, at first I was angry. I told myself it wasn't fair. But the truth is I was wrong. I treated you unfairly. I let my own bias guide me that night. And I've spent every day since trying to understand why." Alicia leaned back slowly. She could see the sincerity in his face. Time had changed him. "I joined a community program a few months ago," he said. "We talk about accountability, race, and fear. It's hard, but it's opened my eyes. And seeing what you've built, I realized I needed to face you, to take responsibility. You didn't deserve what I did." For a moment, Alicia didn't know what to say. She had imagined this meeting many times in her mind, but never like this. Never with such humility. Finally, she spoke quietly. "I accept your apology," she said. "And I appreciate that you came here." "That takes courage." He looked up, surprised. "You're not angry?" "I was," she admitted. "For a long time. But I learned that holding on to anger only keeps you in the past. I had to let it go if I wanted to move forward." He nodded slowly. "You've done more than move forward. You changed things." Alicia smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone. A lot of people wanted change too. They just needed someone to believe it was possible." They talked for a while longer. He told her he was now working with a small nonprofit, helping former officers reintegrate into civilian life. "It's not easy," he said, "but I want to do something good now." Before he left, he said quietly, "Thank you for listening, and for not letting that night define us both in hate." Alicia stood, extending her hand. "Take care of yourself," she said sincerely. As he left, she sat back down, staring out her office window. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of closure. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about excusing what had happened. It was about freeing yourself from its grip. That night, Alicia wrote a short reflection in her journal. Growth isn't loud. It's when two people who once stood on opposite sides finally see each other as human. A few weeks later, Alicia's project was featured at a national conference on justice reform. She was invited to give the keynote address. The event brought together leaders from every corner of the country: judges, officers, lawyers, activists, and educators. Standing backstage, Alicia felt a quiet mix of nerves and gratitude. When she stepped out to speak, the audience rose in applause. "I want to tell you about a moment that changed my life," she began. "It wasn't a moment of success or recognition. It was a moment of fear. But from that fear came understanding, and from that understanding came change." She spoke not just about policies, but about people, about the officer who had come to apologize, about the recruits who had learned to listen, about the citizens who had found courage in kindness. "I've learned that the real measure of justice isn't punishment," she said softly. "It's progress. And progress starts when we stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as human." When she finished, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. Many stood up, clapping until Alicia had to smile through tears. After the speech, a young woman approached her backstage. She looked nervous but determined. "Ms. Monroe," she said, "I'm studying criminal justice. Your story made me want to become a lawyer, not to win cases, but to change how people see fairness." Alicia's heart warmed. "That's the best reason of all," she said. "Promise me one thing. Always lead with empathy." The girl nodded, smiling through tears. "I will." Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Alicia stood on the balcony, looking over the quiet city below. The world felt big, bigger than ever. But she no longer felt small within it. She thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the progress, the forgiveness. It had all led to this, a moment of peace, not because everything was perfect, but because she had learned how to carry the imperfect with grace. Months passed, and Alicia's work continued. The Bridging Trust project expanded internationally, with organizations in Canada and the UK inviting her to share her methods. She traveled often, but made sure to stay connected to her home community, visiting schools and small gatherings whenever she could. During one of those visits, She met a group of high school students preparing a documentary about race and justice. They asked if they could interview her. She agreed, sitting in a circle with them in the school library. One student asked, "Do you think the world can ever be completely fair?" Alicia smiled thoughtfully. Completely? Maybe not, but it can be kinder. And kindness is where fairness begins. The students nodded, writing down her words. When the interview ended, they all thanked her, and one of them said, "We're going to name the film Bridging Trust." That night, Alicia walked through the streets of her hometown, noticing how familiar and different everything looked at the same time. There were murals now. One of them even painted her silhouette beside the words, "Stand tall in truth." It made her smile, not out of pride but out of gratitude. As she turned the corner, she saw a police cruiser parked nearby. For a brief moment, the sight made her chest tighten, an old instinct that hadn't fully faded. But then the officer inside waved kindly and she waved back. The fear that once lived in her heart was gone, replaced by something stronger, trust, earned through patience and courage. A few weeks later, Alicia received a call from a national news outlet asking if she would consider writing a book about her journey. She hesitated. She'd never seen herself as a writer. But after some thought, she agreed. The process took months. She wrote late into the night, pouring her memories and lessons onto the page. She wanted the book to feel honest, not polished. Real stories, real feelings. When it was published, it quickly became a bestseller. People wrote to her from around the world saying how her words had helped them heal from their own experiences of unfairness and fear. At a signing event, a young man approached her quietly. "I read your book," he said. "It helped me forgive someone I thought I never could." Alicia smiled, her heart full. "Then it did its job," she said. Years later, when Alicia looked back on everything, she realized her life had become something she never planned. A story of transformation. The moment that could have broken her had instead shaped her into someone who built bridges where walls once stood. She still worked as a lawyer, still believed in justice, but she also believed in humanity more than ever. She had seen people change. She had seen compassion win, and that gave her hope for the future. One evening, she sat at her desk reading through letters from strangers, some thanking her, others sharing their stories. She took a deep breath and whispered softly, "This is why it was worth it." Outside her window, the city lights shimmered. The same world that had once frightened her now felt full of possibility. And as she closed her journal for the night, Alicia smiled to herself, not because she had changed the world completely, but because she had changed the way people believed in change itself. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, still moments of unfairness, still fear in some corners, but there would also be people like her, people who refused to let fear win. And that was enough.